She murmured, "Don't hold me, I'm shattered." But the lonesome rancher stayed silent and cradled her baby to sleep. The silence of the plains. The Wyoming sky stretched wide, blue and endless, broken only by rolling clouds that drifted lazy across the horizon. Wind hissed through the tall prairie grass, carrying with it the smell of earth and sage. Somewhere far in the distance, a hawk called, a lonely cry echoing over miles of nothing. Elias Carter rode through that silence with nothing but the creak of saddle leather and the steady clop of his gelding's hooves to keep him company. The lonesome rancher had long since grown accustomed to the solitude of his spread, 300 acres of rough land dotted with mesquite, cottonwoods, and a herd of hardy cattle that didn't need coddling. He liked it that way. Fences, cows, the open range, they asked for nothing more than the work of his hands. It had been 5 years since he'd buried his folks, and 3 since he'd decided there wasn't much point in chasing town dances or writing to mail-order brides like other men did. His life was steady, predictable, quiet. At least until the night he found her. The storm had come sudden. What began as gray clouds over the mountains turned fierce by sundown, rain slashing sideways, lightning cutting jagged streaks across the heavens. Elias had been checking his fence line when he heard it. Not thunder, not the cry of a coyote, but something softer. A whimper. He pulled his slicker tighter, urging his horse toward the sound. There, half hidden beneath a broken wagon, he found a woman. Her dress was soaked, clinging to her like a second skin. Mud streaked her face, and in her arms she clutched a tiny bundle wrapped in a threadbare shawl. Her eyes, wide, hollow, the color of storm-tossed seas, lifted to his. Don't touch me," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm broken." Elias didn't answer. He simply swung down from his saddle, boots sinking into the muck. He crouched low, careful not to startle her further, and glanced at the bundle in her arms. The baby squirmed, its thin wails nearly lost against the howl of wind. "Your young one's cold," Elias said quietly. His voice was deep, steady as a fence post. She shook her head, clinging tighter. "No, please. I can't." But Elias didn't press. Instead, he shrugged off his coat and draped it gently over the both of them, shielding the child from the rain. Then he reached down, hand strong and sure, and lifted the wagon wheel just enough for her to crawl free. The woman staggered, nearly falling. Elias caught her elbow but released it at once when she flinched. His gaze softened. He wasn't the type to force closeness. Instead, he motioned toward his horse. "Come on," he said simply. The ride back to the ranch house was long. Elias held the reins while the woman sat behind him, rigid, the baby between them. He didn't ask questions. Didn't pry. The prairie taught a man that silence was sometimes kinder than words. By the time they reached the cabin, a sturdy log house Elias had built with his own hands, the storm had eased. He dismounted first, then held his arms out, not to her, but toward the baby. Her lips trembled. "Don't take him." "I won't," Elias said. And he didn't. He only guided her inside where warmth and the smell of wood smoke wrapped around them. The woman's steps faltered on the threshold, as though she hadn't crossed into a safe home in years. Elias noticed how her shoulders curled inward, how her fingers dug into the blanket that held her child. Without a word, he stirred the fire higher, then pulled a rocking chair close. "Sit." She obeyed, half from exhaustion, half from some fragile trust that had sparked in her. Elias turned away to give her space, rummaging for a kettle and clean tin cup. Soon the soft gurgle of boiling water filled the silence. At last, when the baby's cries grew louder, Elias crossed the room again. He didn't reach for her. He reached for the small cradle tucked in the corner, unused since his mother's time, and pulled it close. Then, very gently, he held out his arms. The woman hesitated, every muscle tight. Finally, with a shuddering breath, she lowered the child into his hands. The rancher rocked the baby slow, steady, like a man who knew the rhythm of quiet nights and crying children. His face was unreadable, but his eyes softened. The woman, who had said she was broken, watched in silence. For the first time in years, her baby slept in peace. Hours passed. She sat curled in the rocker, watching the man she did not know soothe the one piece of her heart that still mattered. When Elias finally spoke, it was low, more to the fire than to her. "You got a name." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then, softly, "Clara." Elias nodded once. "Clara. And him." He glanced down at the baby, who stirred faintly but didn't wake. She swallowed hard. "Samuel." Elias rocked the child a little longer, then eased him into the cradle by the fire. The baby sighed, tiny fist curling, and slept on. Clara's breath hitched. Her hands trembled in her lap. Why are you helping us?" Elias leaned back, resting one arm on his knee. His voice was plain, honest. "Because you needed it. Nothing more. No demand, no expectation. Just truth." Clara's eyes stung. She had heard so many words in the past, harsh, cruel, demanding. But silence, and a man's steady hands, spoke louder than anything else. That first night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the rocker while Elias took the floor by the hearth, arms folded across his chest. The firelight caught the hard planes of his face, the wear of years spent alone. Once, near dawn, she whispered into the darkness, as if testing whether the words still carried meaning. "Don't hold me," she murmured. "I'm shattered." Elias didn't move, didn't try to comfort her with words that meant nothing. He only shifted, pulled the blanket higher over his shoulders, and kept watch until the morning light seeped through the windows. For the first time in months, Clara felt safe. Not whole, not healed, but safe enough to let her baby sleep. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning. The healing of quiet hands. The days that followed blurred into one another, stitched together by the rhythm of ranch life. Clara awoke each morning to the smell of coffee and wood smoke, Elias already outside tending to the cattle before the sun crested the hills. His boots left tracks across the dirt floor as he returned for breakfast, silent but steady, moving with a kind of practiced solitude she couldn't quite understand. Clara lingered in his cabin, cradling Samuel close, wary of overstaying her welcome. She told herself she'd leave once the storm passed, once she found strength in her legs again. But each dawn came, and somehow she remained. Elias didn't press her to explain where she came from, or why she had been caught alone beneath a broken wagon. His silence was neither cold nor indifferent. It was patient, like the earth itself waiting for spring. One afternoon, as Samuel fussed and Clara tried rocking him to sleep, Elias set down his tools and approached. She stiffened, clutching her son tighter. "May I?" he asked. His voice was low, almost careful. Clara hesitated, then nodded. Elias took Samuel into his arms with the same gentleness he had shown the first night. He rocked the baby against his broad chest, humming low and wordless. Samuel stilled, then sighed, drifting into slumber. Clara's throat tightened. "You make it look easy." "Not easy," Elias replied. "Just takes time." Clara's gaze dropped. "I've had nothing but time. And still, I don't know how to be what he needs." Elias glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You're here. That's what he needs." Simple words, yet they burrowed deep into Clara's chest, stirring something she thought long dead. As spring edged into summer, Clara began helping around the ranch. At first she did small things, mending shirts, sweeping floors, tending the fire while Samuel napped. Slowly, Elias guided her outside. He showed her how to scatter feed for the chickens, how to patch a fence, how to saddle a horse. "You don't have to keep me busy," she murmured once, wiping sweat from her brow. "I'm not," Elias said plainly. "Just thought you'd like to remember what strong feels like." The words struck her harder than she expected. She hadn't felt strong in years, not since before the man she had once trusted had broken her with cruel words and harsher hands. But here, under the wide Wyoming sky, with Elias's quiet presence beside her, she began to remember. Still, nights were the hardest. Shadows crept in, whispering of past hurts, of the lies she'd been told, that she was useless, weak, unworthy of love. Sometimes Samuel's cries would wake her trembling, her hands cold as ice. It was during one of those nights that Elias found her sitting by the cradle, shoulders shaking. "Clara." His voice was soft, steady. She shook her head. Don't come near me. I'm broken." He didn't argue. Didn't touch. He simply crouched beside the cradle, lifted Samuel, and began to rock him gently. The baby's cries softened, then ceased altogether. The silence stretched. Firelight flickered across Elias's worn face, casting deep shadows in the hollows of his eyes. Clara stared at him, a lump rising in her throat. "Why don't you say anything?" she whispered. "Why don't you tell me to stop being weak? To pull myself together?" Elias didn't look up. "Because you're not weak. You're healing." Her breath hitched. "And if I never do?" Finally, he lifted his gaze, steady as the mountains. "Then I'll keep rocking Samuel. And I'll keep waiting." Tears spilled hot down Clara's cheeks. No one had ever given her that kind of answer before. Not a demand, not a deadline. Just patience. The weeks unfolded like new pages of a book. Clara found herself humming while she worked, her voice timid at first, then stronger. Samuel grew plump and rosy-cheeked, gurgling happily whenever Elias lifted him high into the air. Slowly, Clara began to trust her own reflection again. She caught glimpses of a woman not shattered, but reshaped, like iron tempered in fire. And in the quiet of the evenings, when the chores were done and Samuel slept peacefully, she would find Elias sitting on the porch, watching the horizon burn gold with sunset. She would sit beside him, sometimes silent, sometimes daring to share fragments of her story. He never interrupted, never judged, just listened, the weight of his presence grounding her. One night, after Samuel had gone to sleep, Clara lingered on the porch. The stars blazed overhead, countless and bright. Elias leaned against the railing, hat tipped back, his face calm as ever. "I used to think no one would ever want me," Clara said softly. "Not after everything." Elias's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Clara turned toward him, her voice trembling. "Do you want me, I mean? Not just Samuel?" The silence that followed was long, heavy. Clara's heart pounded. Finally, Elias shifted, his eyes meeting hers. "Clara, I've wanted you since the night I found you in the storm. But wanting don't matter unless you're ready to be wanted." Her breath caught. Tears welled again, but this time they were not born of pain, they were born of hope. Slowly she reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed against his. He didn't move, didn't seize the moment. He only let her decide. And when her fingers laced with his, Elias's hand closed gently around hers. For the first time, Clara didn't flinch. The ranch changed after that. It no longer felt like his or hers, it became theirs. Clara laughed more freely, her steps lighter as she carried Samuel across the fields. Elias taught her to ride properly, grinning when she managed to stay in the saddle through a gallop. At night, when shadows threatened to return, she found comfort not in empty silence, but in the steady heartbeat of the man beside her. One evening, Samuel fussed, and Clara tried to soothe him. Elias came forward, took the baby into his arms, and rocked him with the same patience as always. Watching him, Clara's chest swelled with something deeper than gratitude, something fiercer, gentler, eternal. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "You don't just rock him, Elias. You rock me, too. You remind me I'm not broken anymore." Elias's eyes softened. "Clara, you were never broken. Just hurt. And hurt can heal." Her tears came freely then, but she didn't hide them. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, Samuel sleeping peacefully between them. For the first time, Clara believed she had found a home, not just a roof and walls, but a place where her heart could rest. Months later, under a harvest moon, Elias stood with Clara in the yard, Samuel toddling between them. The land stretched wide around them, strong and steady, much like the man at her side. Clara turned, looking into Elias's eyes, her voice sure. "You saved me when you didn't have to. You gave me time when no one else would. You gave Samuel a father when he had none." Elias shook his head slightly. "I didn't save you, Clara. You saved yourself. I just held the line until you were ready." Clara smiled through tears, stepping closer. "Then hold the line with me. Forever." Elias's answer was not in words, but in the way he pulled her close, slow, careful, reverent, as though she were both fragile and unbreakable all at once. And for the first time, Clara didn't murmur that she was shattered. She whispered instead, "I'm whole. With you."